The morning sun cast long shadows across Maple Street as Mrs. Henderson peered through her kitchen window, clutching her coffee cup with trembling hands. There it was again, that massive black dog prowling behind the chain-link fence of the old Johnson property. The animal stood nearly 3 feet tall, its muscular frame rippling beneath a coat so dark it seemed to absorb the sunlight. Yellow eyes scanned the neighborhood with an intensity that made her stomach churn. "Harold!" she called to her husband, never taking her eyes off the creature. "That beast is out there again. We need to call animal control." Harold shuffled into the kitchen, adjusting his reading glasses. At 72, he had seen his share of neighborhood dogs, but this one was different. The animal's head was broad and powerful, with a jaw that looked capable of crushing bone. Its ears stood erect, constantly swiveling to catch every sound. Even from 50 yards away, the dog's presence felt threatening. The Hendersons weren't alone in their fear. Since the dog had appeared 3 weeks ago, the entire neighborhood had been on edge. Children no longer played in their front yards. Morning joggers had changed their routes. Even the mailman, usually fearless in his duties, had started carrying pepper spray. The dog belonged to the Millers, a family that had moved into the run-down house at the end of the street just a month prior. Tom Miller worked double shifts at the factory, leaving before dawn and returning after dark. His wife Sarah struggled with chronic illness, rarely venturing outside. Their 16-year-old son Jake had quickly earned a reputation as a troublemaker, skipping school, staying out late, and showing little respect for authority. Nobody knew exactly what breed the dog was, but everyone had theories. "Definitely part pit bull," claimed Mr. Rodriguez from across the street. "Look at that head, those muscles. That's a fighting dog if I ever saw one." Others whispered about Rottweiler or even wolf hybrid. The uncertainty only fueled the fear. The animal's behavior didn't help its reputation. It would pace the fence line for hours, occasionally releasing deep, rumbling growls that carried across the quiet suburban street. When delivery trucks approached, the dog would launch itself against the fence with such force that the metal posts shook. The sound of its barking was unlike anything the neighbors had heard. Not the sharp yapping of smaller dogs, but a deep, booming sound that seemed to come from the depths of the earth. Children walking to school had to pass the Miller property, and parents had started driving them instead. 8-year-old Emma Chen had nightmares about the dog breaking through the fence. Her mother, Lisa, had organized a petition among the neighbors, demanding that the city investigate the dangerous animal situation on their street. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning when elderly Mr. Watson was walking his small terrier, Buttons. As they passed the Miller house, the black dog suddenly appeared at the fence, pressing its massive head between the metal links. Buttons, terrified, slipped his collar and ran into the street, nearly getting hit by a passing car. Mr. Watson, shaken and angry, immediately called the police. Officer Martinez arrived within an hour, his patrol car drawing curious neighbors from their homes. He knocked on the Miller's door, but nobody answered. Through the front window, he could see the house was sparsely furnished, with moving boxes still stacked in corners. The officer walked around to the backyard where the dog watched him with those unsettling yellow eyes. "Easy there, boy," Martinez said, trying to project calm authority. The dog didn't growl or bark, but it didn't wag its tail either. It simply stared, as if evaluating whether the officer posed a threat. Martinez noted the adequate fence height and the presence of food and water bowls, but he also documented several neighbor complaints in his report. That evening, Jake Miller returned from another day of skipping classes to find his neighborhood buzzing with tension. Mrs. Henderson cornered him at his mailbox, her voice shaking with emotion. "That animal of yours is terrorizing this entire street," she said. "Something needs to be done before someone gets hurt." Jake's jaw tightened. At 16, he was tall for his age, but still carried the awkward proportions of adolescence. His dark hair fell across his eyes, which held a defiance born from years of being judged before anyone bothered to know him. "Rex hasn't hurt anybody," he replied, his voice steady despite his anger. "Yet," Mrs. Henderson shot back. "But it's only a matter of time. That dog is dangerous and everyone knows it." As Jake walked toward his house, he could feel the eyes of his neighbors following him. Whispered conversations stopped when he passed. Front doors that had been open suddenly closed. The message was clear. He and his family, and especially their dog, were not welcome here. Inside the house, Jake found his mother, Sarah, resting on the couch, her face pale from another difficult day. The stress of the neighborhood situation wasn't helping her condition. His father Tom wouldn't be home for hours, leaving Jake to deal with the mounting pressure alone. He walked to the back door and looked out at Rex, who was lying quietly in the shade of an old oak tree. The dog's ears perked up when he saw Jake, and his tail gave a slight wag, the only sign of warmth the animal had shown all day. To Jake, Rex wasn't the monster the neighbors saw. He was family, perhaps the only family member who understood what it felt like to be judged without a fair chance. But as Jake watched the patrol car make another slow pass in front of their house, he realized that understanding and acceptance were two very different things. The neighborhood had made up its mind about Rex and, by extension, about the Miller family. Tomorrow would bring new complaints, new fears, and new pressure to get rid of the dog that everyone called dangerous. Jake pressed his hand against the glass door, and Rex approached the other side, placing his massive paw against the same spot. In that moment, boy and dog shared a silent understanding. They were both outsiders in a world that had already decided who they were supposed to be. The city council meeting was packed beyond capacity, with neighbors spilling into the hallway and clustering around the doorway. Jake Miller sat in the back row, his shoulders hunched as dozens of hostile eyes periodically turned toward him. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the room, making everyone look pale and angry. Lisa Chen stood at the podium, a thick folder of signed petitions in her hands. "Members of the council," she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to getting results. "We're here tonight because our neighborhood is being held hostage by a dangerous animal. For weeks, our children have been afraid to play outside. Our elderly residents are prisoners in their own homes." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Henderson nodded vigorously, while Mr. Rodriguez held up his phone showing a video he'd taken of Rex pacing the fence line. The footage made the dog look even more menacing, shot from a low angle that emphasized his size and power. "This isn't about being unfair to any family," Lisa continued, glancing briefly toward Jake. "This is about public safety. We have documentation of aggressive behavior, complaints from multiple residents, and a police report noting concerns about the animal's temperament." Councilwoman Roberts, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed the papers before her. "Mr. Miller," she called out, scanning the room. "Is the dog's owner present?" Jake's father, Tom, had taken the night off work specifically for this meeting, but he was running late due to a crisis at the factory. Sarah Miller was too ill to attend. Jake slowly stood up, feeling the weight of every stare in the room. "I'm Jake Miller," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Rex is my dog." The room buzzed with whispered comments. Someone muttered, "Just a kid," while another voice said, "Where are his parents?" Jake felt his face burn with embarrassment and anger. Councilwoman Roberts frowned. "Son, we really need to speak with an adult about this matter. This is a serious situation that requires parental involvement." "My dad's coming," Jake replied, checking his phone for any messages. "But I can speak for Rex. I'm the one who takes care of him." Dr. Amanda Foster, the city's animal control director, stood up from her seat at the side table. She was a compact woman with graying hair and kind eyes that had seen too many animals surrendered or put down due to fear rather than facts. "If I may, Councilwoman Roberts, I'd like to present some additional information." Dr. Foster approached the podium with a manila folder. "I conducted a site visit to the Miller property yesterday. While the dog is indeed large and intimidating, in appearance I found no evidence of actual aggressive behavior. The animal was alert but not hostile during my examination. The fencing is adequate and the dog appears to be properly cared for." Lisa Chen interrupted. "But what about the terrorizing behavior? The constant barking? The way it throws itself at the fence?" "Those behaviors," Dr. Foster explained patiently, "are typical of a dog that's stressed, possibly from being in a new environment or from sensing hostility from humans nearby. They're not necessarily indicators of a dangerous animal." Jake felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by the angry voices rising from the crowd. "Easy for her to say," someone called out. "She doesn't have to live next to that beast." Mr. Watson, still shaken from the incident with his terrier, struggled to his feet. "That monster nearly got my buttons killed. What happens when it breaks? Through that fence? What happens when it goes after a child instead of a small dog? The room erupted in supporting voices. Fear was a powerful motivator, and logic had little chance against the emotional testimony of frightened neighbors. Jake wanted to stand up, to defend Rex, to tell them that the dog had never actually hurt anyone. But he was 16, alone, and facing a room full of adults who had already made up their minds. Just as Councilwoman Roberts was about to call for order, the meeting room doors burst open. Tom Miller rushed in, still wearing his factory uniform, his face flushed from running. He quickly surveyed the hostile crowd and moved to sit beside his son. "Sorry I'm late," Tom said, addressing the council. "There was an emergency at work. I'm Tom Miller, and I understand there are concerns about our dog." Tom was a large man, broad-shouldered from years of physical labor, but his presence seemed to calm rather than intimidate. He listened respectfully as the complaints were repeated, nodding occasionally, never interrupting or becoming defensive. When the testimonies ended, Tom stood up slowly. "I hear what everyone's saying," he began, his voice carrying the weight of someone who chose his words carefully. "And I understand you're scared. Moving to a new place is hard on a dog, just like it's hard on people. Rex isn't used to being around so many neighbors. Where we lived before, we had acres of land and the nearest house was half a mile away." He paused, looking around the room. "But fear doesn't make something dangerous. Rex has never bitten anyone, never escaped from our yard, never actually threatened anyone. He's just different. And sometimes different feels scary." Mrs. Henderson stood up, her voice shaking with emotion. "Mr. Miller, with all due respect, you work all the time. You don't see what we see. That dog is not normal. It watches us like we're prey." "Maybe," Tom said quietly. "He's watching because he's trying to understand why everyone's afraid of him. Maybe he's just trying to figure out where he fits in this new place." Jake looked at his father with new respect. Tom wasn't an educated man, but he understood Rex in a way that all the petitions and complaints couldn't touch. The dog wasn't angry or vicious. He was confused and stressed by the constant hostility surrounding him. Dr. Foster spoke up again. "I'd like to propose a compromise. Rather than immediate removal, I suggest a 30-day evaluation period. The dog remains on the property, but I'll conduct weekly behavioral assessments. If there are any actual aggressive incidents during this time, we'll revisit the removal option." The crowd was not pleased with this suggestion. Voices rose in protest demanding immediate action. But Councilwoman Roberts seemed intrigued by the professional approach. "What would this evaluation involve?" she asked. "Structured observation, behavioral testing, and documentation of any actual incidents versus perceived threats. It would give us real data instead of emotional reactions." Jake felt a surge of gratitude toward Dr. Foster, but he could see the anger building in his neighbors' faces. They wanted Rex gone, not studied. They wanted their fears validated, not challenged. As the debate continued, Jake noticed something that made his blood run cold. Several of his neighbors were looking at him and his father with the same suspicion and hostility they showed toward Rex. It wasn't just about the dog anymore. It was about the Miller family being different, being outsiders, being the kind of people who would own a dog that scared everyone else. The council would vote next week, but Jake already knew that win or lose, nothing would ever be the same on Maple Street. The third week of Dr. Foster's evaluation period arrived with an unseasonably warm October day. Jake had been walking Rex on a leash around their backyard every evening, hoping to show the neighbors that the dog was under control. The daily routine had become a strange kind of performance, with curtains twitching in windows as neighbors watched their every move. Rex had actually been calmer lately, perhaps sensing Jake's determination to prove everyone wrong. The dog no longer rushed to the fence when people passed by, and his barking had decreased significantly. Dr. Foster's weekly reports noted marked improvement in stress behaviors, but Jake could tell that the neighbors weren't interested in progress reports. They wanted the dog gone. That Tuesday started like any other school day that Jake had decided to skip. His father had already left for work, and his mother was having one of her bad days, sleeping off the effects of her medication. Jake sat in the backyard with Rex, throwing a tennis ball and watching the dog's powerful muscles work as he retrieved it. For moments like these, the neighborhood drama faded away, and it was just a boy and his dog enjoying the morning sun. Around 10 o'clock, Jake heard the familiar sound of the mail truck approaching. Rex's ears perked up and he trotted toward the fence, but he didn't bark or lunge as he had weeks before. Progress, Jake thought with satisfaction. What happened next would be debated and analyzed for months afterward, with each witness remembering different details and different timelines. But everyone agreed on the basic facts. Little Emma Chen, age 8, was walking home from school early due to a suspected case of chickenpox when she dropped her backpack near the miller's fence. Jake was inside the house, making a sandwich when he heard Emma's high-pitched scream pierce the morning air. He dropped everything and ran outside to find the most horrifying scene imaginable. Emma on the ground just outside their fence, Rex standing over her, and blood on the little girl's arm. "Get away from her," Jake shouted, rushing toward the fence. But Rex wasn't attacking. He was standing perfectly still, looking confused and almost guilty. The gate to their backyard was open, swinging in the slight breeze. Jake's heart stopped. He was sure he had latched the gate after their morning walk. He always checked it twice, but there it was, wide open, and Rex was outside the fence with an injured child. Emma was crying hysterically, clutching her left arm where 3 distinct puncture wounds were bleeding. She looked up at Jake with terror in her eyes. "The dog bit me," she sobbed. "I was just getting my backpack and he came out and bit me." Jake knelt beside Emma, his hands shaking as he examined her arm. The wounds were real, definitely bite marks, but they seemed almost gentle for a dog Rex's size. If Rex had wanted to seriously hurt her, he could have done much worse damage. But that rational thought was lost in the chaos of the moment. "I'm calling 911, Mrs. Henderson screamed from her front porch, her phone already pressed to her ear. "That monster finally attacked someone. I knew this would happen." Within minutes, the street was filled with emergency vehicles. An ambulance, 2 police cars, and Dr. Foster's animal control van all arrived with sirens wailing. Neighbors poured out of their houses, many of them filming with their phones. Jake felt like he was trapped in a nightmare as he watched Rex being loaded into the animal control van. "No, wait," Jake pleaded with Dr. Foster. "There has to be an explanation. Rex wouldn't just attack someone. He's never been aggressive." Dr. Foster's face was grim but professional. "Jake, I have to follow protocol now. There's been a bite incident with injuries. Rex will be quarantined while we investigate." Emma was loaded into the ambulance, her mother Lisa holding her hand and shooting venomous looks toward Jake. "This is your fault," Lisa said through tears. "We warned everyone this would happen, but nobody listened." Officer Martinez took detailed photographs of the scene and measured the distance from the gate to where Emma had been found. He interviewed neighbors, each of whom seemed eager to share their opinions about the dangerous dog and the irresponsible family who owned him. "The gate was open," Jake kept insisting to anyone who would listen, "but I closed it this morning. I always close it. Someone must have opened it." Mr. Rodriguez, who had been watching from his front yard, shook his head. "Son, you need to face facts. That dog got out and attacked a little girl. Making excuses won't change what happened." Jake's father Tom arrived home from work to find news vans parked on their street and reporters trying to interview neighbors. The story was spreading beyond their small community. "Dangerous dog attacks child despite warning signs" was already trending on local social media. Tom found Jake sitting on their front steps, his head in his hands. "Dad, I don't understand what happened," Jake said, his voice breaking. "I know I closed that gate. And Rex has never bitten anyone. Something's not right about this." Tom sat down beside his son, feeling the weight of hostile stares from across the street. "Sometimes things happen that don't make sense," he said quietly. "But a little girl got hurt and Rex was involved. We have to deal with that reality." That evening, Dr. Foster came by to discuss the situation privately. She sat at their kitchen table, her expression troubled. "The bite wounds are consistent with Rex's teeth," she said. "But I have to tell you, something feels off about this whole situation." "What do you mean?" Tom asked. "In my 20 years of animal control work, I've seen a lot of dog attacks. They usually follow a pattern. The dog is agitated, territorial, or feels threatened. But according to all the witnesses, Rex was just standing there when they found him. No barking, no aggressive posturing, no signs of an adrenaline response." Jake leaned forward eagerly. "So you believe something else happened?" Dr. Foster chose her words carefully. I believe Rex's teeth made contact with Emma's arm, but the circumstances surrounding that contact are unclear. Unfortunately, the law doesn't care about circumstances. A dog bite is a dog bite, and with Rex's size and the neighborhood's documented fears, this isn't going to end well. The next morning brought devastating news. The city council had called an emergency session and voted unanimously to classify Rex as a dangerous animal. Tom received an official notice that they had 72 hours to remove the dog from city limits permanently, or Rex would be euthanized. Jake stared at the legal document, the words blurring through his tears. All around them, neighbors were celebrating their victory. The dangerous dog would finally be gone and their children would be safe. But Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were all celebrating a lie. Something had happened in those few minutes when Emma was alone by their fence. Something that had nothing to do with Rex being vicious or dangerous. Someone had opened that gate and Jake was determined to find out who. The problem was he only had 3 days to prove everyone wrong about the dog they called dangerous. 3 days to save Rex's life and maybe his own faith in justice. Jake barely slept that night, his mind racing with questions that wouldn't leave him alone. He kept replaying the morning of the incident, trying to remember every detail. He was certain he had closed and latched the gate after their walk, just as he had every morning for weeks. The gate had a simple but secure latch that required deliberate action to open. It couldn't have blown open in the wind. At 6 in the morning, Jake slipped out of the house while his parents were still sleeping. He walked to the fence where Emma had been found, studying the area with new eyes. The ground was still marked with chalk outlines from the police investigation, and he could see droplets of blood that had been missed during cleanup. Kneeling down, Jake examined the gate mechanism carefully. The latch showed slight scratches around the metal, scratches that looked fresh. Someone had definitely manipulated this latch recently, but that didn't prove anything. The police and animal control officers had opened and closed it multiple times during their investigation. Looking for evidence? Jake spun around to find Dr. Foster approaching with a cup of coffee and a thoughtful expression. She had dark circles under her eyes, suggesting she hadn't slept much either. "Dr. Foster, I know how this looks," Jake began, "but something's not right. Rex wouldn't just attack a little girl. He's never shown aggression toward children." Dr. Foster nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about that too. In my report, I noted several inconsistencies that bother me professionally." She pulled out a small notebook and flipped through several pages. First, Emma's injuries. 3 puncture wounds, but they're relatively shallow for a dog Rex's size. If he had intended to attack, the damage would have been much more severe. Jake felt a spark of hope. "What else?" "The positioning bothers me. Emma was found lying on her back about 3 feet from the fence with Rex standing over her, but not touching her. In typical attack scenarios, dogs either continue the aggressive behavior until separated, or they run away. Rex was just standing there, almost like he was confused." Dr. Foster paused, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. "There's something else. I examined Rex's mouth and found fabric fibers caught between his teeth. Blue fabric that matches Emma's jacket. But here's the thing. The fibers were caught in his back molars, not his front teeth where they would be if he had bitten her arm." Jake's mind raced. What does that mean? It could mean several things. But one possibility is that Rex had Emma's sleeve in his mouth and was pulling, not biting, like he was trying to help her or move her away from something. The implications hit Jake like a thunderbolt. You think he was trying to protect her? I think there's more to this story than anyone realizes. But proving it is another matter entirely. The legal system doesn't deal in speculation, only facts. And the fact is, Emma has bite wounds and Rex was found at the scene. Dr. Foster's radio crackled to life with another call, and she reluctantly prepared to leave. "Jake, I want to help, but my hands are tied by protocol. If you're going to find answers, you need to do it fast. The 72-hour deadline isn't flexible." After Dr. Foster left, Jake decided to do something he'd been avoiding. Talk to the other neighbors, not to defend Rex, but to gather information. He started with Mr. Watson, the elderly man whose terrier had been frightened by Rex weeks earlier. Mr. Watson answered his door reluctantly, eyeing Jake with suspicion. "What do you want, son?" "Mr. Watson, I just want to understand what happened." "Did you see anything unusual that morning? Anyone around our fence before the incident?" The old man's expression softened slightly. Despite his fear of Rex, he seemed to recognize Jake's genuine distress. "I was in my garden around 9:30 before all the commotion. I saw that Chen girl walking by with her backpack, but she was on the other side of the street. The other side? Jake asked, confused. But she was found right by our fence, Mr. Watson nodded. That's what struck me as odd when I heard about it later. She had no reason to be on your side of the street. Her house is in the opposite direction. This was the first new information Jake had heard. Emma lived 4 houses down on the opposite side of Maple Street. For her to be near the Miller fence, she would have had to cross the street and walk in the wrong direction. Jake's next stop was Mrs. Henderson, though he dreaded the conversation. She answered the door with obvious reluctance, her face set in hard lines. Mrs. Henderson, I know you think Rex is dangerous, but I need to ask you something. Did you see Emma Chen that morning before the incident? I most certainly did, she replied curtly. That poor child was walking right into danger, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. What do you mean? Mrs. Henderson paused, seeming to realize she had said more than she intended. Well, I saw her walking toward your fence, and I thought to myself, that girl shouldn't be over there. But I was on the phone with my sister, and by the time I hung up, all the screaming had started. Jake pressed further. Did you see anyone else around our fence that morning? Anyone who might have opened our gate?
Young man, are you suggesting someone deliberately let that beast out?
That's ridiculous. Your family is responsible for controlling that animal, and you failed. But Jake caught something in her tone, a slight hesitation that suggested she might know more than she was saying. Before he could ask another question, she firmly closed the door. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jake was walking back toward his house when 10-year-old Marcus Rodriguez ran up to him. Marcus was Mr. Rodriguez's grandson, visiting for the week from out of state. Hey, Marcus called out, looking around nervously. Are you the guy with the big dog? Yeah, Jake replied cautiously. Why? I saw something weird the other day, but my grandpa said I shouldn't get involved. But that little girl got hurt, so maybe I should tell someone. Jake's heart began to race. What did you see? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I was sitting in Grandpa's front window Tuesday morning playing on my tablet. I saw that girl Emma walking down the street, but she was acting strange. Strange how? She kept looking around like she was doing something she wasn't supposed to. Then she went to your fence and did something to the gate. I couldn't see exactly what, but she was messing with it for like a minute. Jake could barely breathe. Are you sure it was Emma? Positive. She had that same blue jacket on and her blonde hair in braids. After she messed with the gate, she went around to the front of your house and just stood there for a while. Then I heard her scream. This changed everything. If Marcus was telling the truth, Emma had deliberately opened the gate herself. But why would an 8-year-old girl do such a thing? And why would she put herself in danger? Marcus, would you be willing to tell the police what you saw? The boy's face paled. I don't know. My grandpa says your dog is dangerous and we should stay out of it. He'll be really mad if he finds out I was talking to you. Jake understood the boy's fear, but he also knew this might be Rex's only chance. Marcus, an innocent animal might die because of what happened. If you really saw Emma open that gate, it could save Rex's life. Marcus looked torn between wanting to help and fear of getting in trouble. Can I think about it? Sure, Jake said, though every hour that passed brought them closer to the deadline. But Marcus, please think about what's right, not just what's safe. As Jake walked home, his mind was spinning with possibilities. If Emma had opened the gate herself, the entire incident took on a different meaning. But proving it would require convincing an 8-year-old to speak up against the pressure of frightened adults. Even more challenging would be figuring out why Emma had done it in the first place. What could motivate a young child to deliberately let out a dog that everyone said was dangerous? The answer to that question might hold the key to saving Rex's life. With less than 24 hours remaining before the deadline, Jake knew he needed help. He couldn't convince an 8-year-old to speak up on his own, and he couldn't force the truth from reluctant neighbors. But there was one person who might be able to reach Emma Chen in a way that adults couldn't. Sarah Miller, despite her illness, had always been good with children. Before her health declined, she had worked as a kindergarten teacher and had a natural ability to make kids feel safe and understood. When Jake explained Marcus's story to his mother, she listened with growing concern. If that little girl opened the gate herself, Sarah said slowly, then she was either very brave or very foolish. Either way, she's probably terrified right now. Mom, everyone thinks she's the victim. Her parents are treating her like she barely survived a vicious attack. How can we ask her to tell the truth when it might make her look bad? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, then struggled to her feet from the couch. Sometimes children do things that seem inexplicable to adults, but they always have their reasons. We need to understand Emma's reason. That afternoon, Sarah Miller did something she hadn't done in months. She left the house. With Jake's help, she walked slowly down Maple Street toward the Chen family home. Several neighbors watched from their windows, surprised to see the reclusive woman who rarely ventured outside. Lisa Chen answered the door with obvious suspicion, but her expression softened when she saw Sarah's frail condition. "Mrs. Miller, is everything all right?" "I know this is difficult," Sarah began, her voice gentle but determined. "I wanted to check on Emma and see how she's healing. As a mother and a former teacher, I understand how traumatic this must be for her." Lisa hesitated, clearly torn between politeness and protectiveness. She's been having nightmares. The doctor says the physical wounds will heal fine, but emotionally, may I speak with her? Sometimes children find it easier to talk to someone who isn't family, especially about scary experiences. Against her better judgment, Lisa invited Sarah inside. Emma was sitting in the living room, her bandaged arm resting in a sling, watching cartoons with the volume turned low. When she saw Sarah, her face showed a complex mix of emotions: fear, guilt, and something that looked almost like relief. "Hi, Emma," Sarah said softly, settling carefully into a chair across from the girl. "I'm Mrs. Miller. I live in the house with the big dog." Emma's eyes widened, but she didn't speak. "I wanted to make sure you were okay," Sarah continued. "And I wanted to tell you something important. What happened wasn't your fault." Lisa started to object, but Sarah held up a gentle hand. "Emma, I know you're scared, and I know grown-ups have been asking you lots of questions, but I want you to know that you're safe now, and whatever really happened, we just want to understand." Emma looked toward her mother, then back at Sarah. "The dog bit me," she said quietly, the words sounding rehearsed. "I know that's what everyone believes," Sarah replied, "but sometimes what looks like one thing is really something else. Can you tell me why you were walking on our side of the street that morning? Your house is in the other direction." Emma's lower lip began to tremble. Lisa moved closer to her daughter, ready to end the conversation, but Emma suddenly began to speak. "I heard them talking," she whispered. "The grown-ups. They said the dog was going to be taken away and killed, but I knew he wasn't really mean." Sarah's heart began to race, but she kept her voice calm. "How did you know he wasn't mean?" "Because last week when I dropped my ball in your yard, he brought it back to the fence for me. He was gentle. And when Mrs. Patterson's cat got stuck in the tree, your dog sat under it and barked until someone came to help." "Mean dogs don't do that." Lisa stared at her daughter in shock. This was the first she was hearing any of this. Emma continued, tears now flowing freely. "I thought if I could show everyone that he wasn't dangerous, they wouldn't take him away. So I opened the gate and went into the yard to pet him and show he was nice." "What happened then, sweetheart?" Sarah asked gently. "I slipped on some wet leaves by the gate and fell down. I hurt my arm on the fence when I fell. Rex came over to me, but he wasn't being mean. He was trying to help me up by pulling on my jacket sleeve." The truth hit Sarah like a physical blow. Rex hadn't attacked Emma. He had been trying to help her after she accidentally injured herself while attempting to prove his innocence. "But honey," Lisa said, her voice shaking, "why didn't you tell us this before?" Emma looked down at her bandaged arm. "Because everyone was so upset, and they kept saying how dangerous the dog was. I thought if I told the truth I would get in trouble for going in the yard, and maybe the dog would still get taken away because I got hurt." Sarah reached out and gently took Emma's uninjured hand. "Emma, you were very brave to try to help Rex, but now we need your help again. That dog is going to be put to sleep tomorrow unless we can tell everyone what really happened." The weight of this information seemed to crush the little girl. "He's going to die because of me?" "Not because of you," Sarah said firmly. "Because of fear and misunderstanding. But you can help fix it by telling the truth." Lisa Chen looked like she was in shock. Her daughter hadn't been attacked by a vicious animal. She had been hurt while trying to save that same animal from an unjust fate. The irony was almost too much to bear. "We have to call the police," Lisa said finally, "and the city council. Emma, we need to tell them exactly what you just told us." That evening, the Chen living room filled with officials. Officer Martinez returned with his notebook. Dr. Foster arrived with her files, and even Councilwoman Roberts came to hear Emma's testimony firsthand. Jake and his parents sat quietly to one side, hardly daring to hope. Emma told her story again, this time with more confidence. She explained about seeing Rex return her ball, about witnessing him alert people to the trapped cat, about overhearing the adult conversations about his fate. She described opening the gate herself, slipping on the wet leaves, and Rex's gentle attempt to help her stand up. The bite marks, Dr. Foster said, they align with your story. Rex was pulling on your sleeve to help you up, and when you moved suddenly, his teeth scraped your arm. It wasn't an attack. It was an accident during a rescue attempt. Officer Martinez closed his notebook with a heavy sigh. This changes the entire nature of the incident. There was no attack, just a child trying to help an animal and getting accidentally injured in the process. Councilwoman Roberts looked at Jake with new respect. Son, I owe you an apology, we all do. Your dog was trying to help, not hurt. But Jake was looking at Emma, this brave little girl who had risked her own safety to prove that Rex deserved better than the fear and hatred he'd received. Thank you, he said simply. You saved his life. Emma managed a small smile through her tears. Is Rex going to be okay now? Dr. Foster nodded. I'll recommend immediate reversal of the dangerous animal classification. Rex can come home tomorrow. As the officials prepared to leave, Jake realized that this incident had revealed something profound about both fear and courage. The adults had been so afraid of what they thought Rex might do that they couldn't see what he actually was. A loyal, gentle animal who had never meant harm to anyone. But it had taken an 8-year-old girl to show them that sometimes the thing we fear most is exactly what we need to understand least. The morning Rex came home was crisp and clear, with autumn leaves dancing in a gentle breeze that seemed to carry away the tension that had gripped Maple Street for weeks. Jake stood outside the animal control facility, his hands shaking as Dr. Foster signed the release papers. He's been a model resident, she said with a smile. Calm, friendly with the staff, and he seems to have missed you terribly. Dogs know when they're loved. When Rex emerged from the building, his tail began wagging the moment he spotted Jake. The reunion was emotional, dog and teenager embracing as if they'd been separated for years instead of days. Rex's powerful body trembled with excitement, and he kept looking up at Jake as if to confirm this wasn't a dream. Come on, boy, Jake whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Let's go home. The walk back to Maple Street felt different than any journey Jake had taken before. Neighbors who had once crossed the street to avoid them now watched from their porches, with expressions ranging from embarrassment to genuine curiosity. Mrs. Henderson even offered a small wave, though she still kept her distance. When they reached their house, Jake was surprised to find Emma Chen sitting on his front steps, her arms still in a sling but her face bright with anticipation. Her mother Lisa stood nearby, looking nervous but determined. Emma wanted to be here when Rex came home, Lisa explained. She's been asking about him every day. Rex approached Emma slowly, his posture gentle and submissive. He seemed to remember their previous encounter and was being extra careful around the small girl. Emma extended her good hand and Rex nuzzled it softly, his tail wagging in a slow, respectful rhythm. I'm sorry I got you in trouble, Emma said softly. I was just trying to help. Jake knelt down beside them. You did help, Emma. You saved him by telling the truth. That was really brave. Over the following weeks, something remarkable began to happen on Maple Street. The incident had forced everyone to confront their own assumptions and fears, and many found themselves curious about the dog they had so quickly condemned. Mr. Watson was the first to make an overture. He approached Jake one afternoon while Rex was lying peacefully in the front yard. Son, he said hesitantly, I think I owe your dog an apology. I let my fear make me see things that weren't there. Marcus Rodriguez, no longer afraid of his grandfather's reaction, became a regular visitor. He would sit in the miller's yard for hours, teaching Rex simple tricks and marveling at the dog's intelligence and gentle nature. His grandfather Miguel eventually joined them, admitting that he had let neighborhood gossip influence his judgment. This dog has a good heart, Miguel said one evening, watching Rex carefully retrieve a tennis ball without disturbing a small bird that had landed nearby. I should have seen that from the beginning. The transformation wasn't universal. Some neighbors remained skeptical, keeping their distance and watching Rex with wary eyes. But even they couldn't deny the evidence of their own observations. Rex was calm, obedient, and showed no signs of the aggression they had feared. Dr. Foster became a regular visitor, conducting follow-up evaluations that consistently showed Rex's excellent temperament. "You know," she told Jake during one visit, "Rex would make an excellent therapy dog. He has the perfect combination of strength and gentleness that works well with people who need emotional support." This observation sparked an idea that would change everything. Sarah Miller, whose health had actually improved during the stress of Rex's crisis, suggested that Rex could visit the local nursing home where several elderly residents rarely received visitors. The first visit was arranged carefully. With Dr. Foster supervising and only a few residents participating, Rex seemed to understand the importance of the occasion, moving slowly and calmly among the wheelchairs and walkers. An elderly woman named Dorothy, who hadn't spoken in weeks according to the staff, suddenly began talking to Rex, telling him about the dog she'd had as a child. "It's remarkable," the nursing home director told Sarah after the visit. "We've never seen such a positive response to a therapy animal. Could you bring him back?" Within 2 months, Rex was making weekly visits to the nursing home, and the staff was documenting significant improvements in several residents' moods and engagement levels. The dog who had once been called dangerous was now bringing joy and healing to people who needed it most. Emma Chen became Rex's most devoted supporter in the neighborhood. Her mother, Lisa, initially reluctant, eventually allowed Emma to help with Rex's training for his therapy work. The little girl had a natural ability to communicate with the dog, and Rex seemed to understand that she was the one who had saved his life. "It's funny," Emma told Jake one afternoon as they watched Rex gently interact with an elderly man during a nursing home visit. "Everyone was afraid of how big and strong he was. But that's exactly what makes him so good at helping people. He's strong enough to support them, but gentle enough not to hurt them." Jake nodded, realizing that Emma had articulated something profound about fear and acceptance. People had seen Rex's size and power as threats, but those same qualities made him uniquely capable of providing comfort and support to those who needed it. The story of Rex and Emma spread beyond Maple Street through local news coverage and social media. Animal welfare organizations used their story as an example of how fear and misunderstanding could nearly lead to tragedy, while the nursing home featured them in their newsletter as an example of how the right animal could make a tremendous difference in elderly care. Tom Miller, watching his son work with Rex during a therapy session, felt a pride that had nothing to do with vindication. Jake had grown during this ordeal, developing a maturity and sense of purpose that would serve him well in life. More importantly, he had learned that sometimes standing up for what's right requires more courage than anyone should have to show, especially at 16. 6 months after the incident, Maple Street had settled into a new normal. Rex was no longer the neighborhood pariah, but had become something of a local celebrity. Children asked their parents if they could pet him. Elderly neighbors looked forward to his daily walks, and even Mrs. Henderson admitted that she slept better knowing such a protective presence was nearby. Jake often reflected on how dramatically things had changed, not just for Rex but for everyone involved. Fear had nearly destroyed an innocent animal and divided a community, but truth, courage, and compassion had prevailed, creating connections and understanding that hadn't existed before. The dog they had called dangerous had revealed the danger of prejudice and the power of redemption. Rex hadn't just won acceptance, he had transformed a neighborhood and taught everyone that sometimes the thing we fear most is exactly what we need to embrace. As Jake watched, Rex gently comforted a lonely nursing home resident one Tuesday afternoon, he realized that they had all learned the most important lesson of all. The size of someone's heart matters far more than the size of their reputation. And sometimes it takes the unconditional love of a dog to remind us what really matters in life.